If you're a contractor, you understand the frustration and hardship payment delays can have on your business. Welcome to Construction Genius. My guest today is Jesse Weissburg. He is the co-founder of Build, and Build is on a mission to provide contractors of all sizes access to funds designed for construction so they can take control of their cash flow and build their businesses on their terms. Jesse and I have a very good conversation looking at the various ways to leverage financing wisely in your organization, the types of financing options that you have as a contractor, and which one you should choose depending on the circumstance that you're in. And we also discuss how you can manage the relationship between yourself, your suppliers, and other contractors involved in your projects, whether you be a subcontractor or a general contractor. Feel free to give me any feedback that you have on this interview, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and also to give us a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. Again, this is Eric Anderton. Thank you for listening to Construction Genius today. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Jesse, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're an expert in terms of leveraging financing. Who do you think should leverage financing over cash, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. First and foremost, let's talk about the times we find ourselves in, right? We have COVID going on. We have a recession. Leveraging financing is always something that you want in your back pocket going into situations like this, because when you need it, it's tough to get. That's when banks are kind of clamping down. So you always want to make sure you have it in your back pocket when things are going well, so you're prepared when there's a downturn in the economy. It's easier to get when you're in a good position.
Right.
Secondarily to that, really any contractor that's looking to grow, doing so out of cash flow, i.e. out of spending your cash is very difficult. It places a huge strain on the business. And one of the challenges, in construction is the payment cycle. When am I actually going to get paid for my work? Is it 30 days? Is it 60? Is it 90 days? Financing really helps even out or level out your cash flow. So anyone that's growth oriented and looking to take on additional projects, as long as you have the labor force, financing is going to add the fuel you need to take your company to the next level. And certainly there's a right size, type of financing, whether you're just starting out or, you're 10 years into it. There are different financial tools you'll want to leverage. But anyone that's really looking to grow, I would urge to start looking to financing if you're not already, doing so.
Why do you think certain types of financing are viewed negatively in construction?
Contractors like to brag that they don't need financing. And I actually have an interesting story on this. Prior to starting Build, so this was, I think, about 2017, I met with a roofing contractor, and they do about 40 million in annual revenue. Met with the CFO. We just had a kind of a customer insight type of call with the CFO and wanted to understand, how they were purchasing materials. Do they have any type of financing in place? And he communicated, yeah, we have 30-day terms with, our supplier that we like to leverage. Okay, that's great. That's how most contractors are purchasing their materials. What about a cash discount? Oh yeah, well, they do offer a 2%, cash discount, which is also pretty standard. A lot of contractors can't take advantage of it because of, cash flow challenges. And I said, okay, well, that makes sense as well. So what about on the financing front? Do you have any financing available? And this is when he kind of started to peacock a little bit and express, yeah, we have a $2 million line of credit, but we don't need to touch it because we have supplier terms and we're able to leverage those. I said, okay, that's interesting. Well, what's the interest rate on your line of credit? And it was about 7%, 8%. So I paused there and thought to myself, okay, so you have a cash discount that you're eligible for, 2% cash discount, right? So if you're going to pay in 30 days with your supplier or a 2% cash discount, well, that's 24%, right? 2% a month, annualized times 12. That's a 24% rate that contractor is effectively paying, or I will say giving up on that cash discount.
Right.
Well, he just communicated to me that the line of credit has a 7% annualized rate.
Mm-hmm.
So here this CFO of a $40 million company is bragging that they don't need to use this line of credit. That's a 7%, interest rate. Meanwhile, he's giving up 24% on the line of credit, and it didn't make any sense. And it was hard to explain to this contractor.
What is the best way for you when you're talking with contractors, just to be able to walk them step by step through this process of understanding where their leverage points are in terms of their financing?
It all starts with the type of financing.
Right.
Because something like a line of credit with a bank, there are going to be certain covenants in place, and you want to make sure those won't cause strains on the business, and you won't be able to meet those demands. So depending where you are as a business, you want to make sure that first and foremost, you're using the right type of financing.
How do you distinguish between the right type of financing and the wrong type of financing?
It depends on what they're going to be using the financing for.
Okay.
So if you have a contractor that needs to, acquire a Caterpillar, for example, a forklift or something, you want to make sure you're gonna leverage financing that matches the useful life of that asset, of that equipment. So whether you're going to lease the equipment or buy the equipment, let's say it's a smaller piece of equipment, let's say it's $70,000. It doesn't make sense to go and use cash when you're going to use that piece of equipment for 5 or 7 years, and you can spread out those payments over that period of time, because that's a useful life of the equipment.
Why is traditional financing difficult for contractors to get approved for?
Most contractors take the majority of their cash out of the business.
Right.
When banks look to underwrite a contractor, they want to see that they have enough cash in the business and enough cash flow coming into the business to cover those payments on the debt and then some. They want a cushion there. And most contractors, they have spikes in their projects coming in throughout the year. It isn't very even. So there are these ebbs and flows throughout the year, and it's very difficult for banks to get comfortable with the future cash flow coming into the business. Coupled with that, they just don't know how to really mitigate their risk with these contractors. And they don't understand the payment challenges and the payment cycle associated with the construction industry. They don't understand that it's typical for a contractor to get paid in about 90 days.
Right.
And that's just where they kind of throw up their hands and say, hey, I can't underwrite the receivables from your GC or your property owner because it's going to take you 90 days to get paid. And we really are looking 30 to 60 days out. So
Right.
As a result, they discount, really the majority of the receivables coming in and steer away from most contractors.
So what are the different financing options available for contractors, and who are they best suited for?
That's a great question. So one that does get somewhat of a bad rap is factoring, invoice factoring. So this is when a contractor performs, work, let's say $100,000 worth of work, and they have an invoice, it's approved, and they go to a company and say, hey, will you advance, 70 to 80% of this invoice? With factoring, the challenge is you need to pay for the materials in order to perform the work.
Right.
You're not going to receive the cash until you've actually performed the work. So if you're a contractor, you're still going to have a challenge there. The other issue is the factoring companies like to insert themselves in the payment process.
Uh-huh.
It means that the GC is going to have to communicate and pay them directly,
Mm-hmm.
which can cause some friction in the relationship between the GC and the subcontractor. So, there are some factoring companies out there that do a good job of this, but it has a relatively bad rap in the industry because of this friction and this, hey, now I need to tell my GC that I'm having cash flow issues because they have to work directly with the factoring company.
Okay.
So typically it's newer contractors that will leverage factoring, or a contractor that has an upcoming project that they're ready to go and they have been paid on this other project. So they'll just use factoring for this one isolated project.
Okay. What are some other options available?
Yeah. So another is your line of credit. And
Right.
depending on the size of the sub or the GC for that matter, it can make sense to go with a line of credit, but you do have to be a bit more established. And
Yep.
if I was a subcontractor looking for working capital, this is by far going to be the cheapest cost of capital out there. Earlier, I alluded to the fact that the bank will put covenants. They're going to put a blanket lien on your assets, which mean if you default on the line of credit, they have a right to your business assets. They're going to want a personal guarantee. And it's going to be difficult for you to receive other type of financing with a line of credit in place because of that blanket lien
Right.
business.
Interesting.
All of this, cheapest cost of capital. And it's a great option if you're looking to cash flow your business. I would say if you can get approved for a line of credit, number one option that I would explore, primarily with probably a local or a regional bank, someone where you develop a relationship with, and you're not just a number. Again, not to throw Bank of America under the bus here, but
Sure.
someone you can develop a relationship with.
Excellent. Excellent. What are some other ones that are perhaps more creative or could perhaps be used in times of crunch, such as, the COVID crisis and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, one of the new verticals out there is material financing. And, so let's talk about supplier terms. Supplier terms are typically about 30 days. Mm-hmm. And, the average payment cycle from the point where a contractor needs to purchase their materials to when they actually get paid for their work is 84 days. There was a study done by PricewaterhouseCoopers. So, there's a gap of about 50-ish days between when the supplier is demanding payment and when the contractor is actually going to get paid by the GC or the property owner. So there are some material financing options out there specifically to bridge this gap that will go out about 120 days, project-based type of financing. You're still going to have the labor component. So that's something, contractors will need to tackle either with factoring or a line of credit. Maybe you couple a few of these options depending on what your need is. But the material financing option is a great option for these contractors.
And that's what you guys specialize in at Build, right?
Yeah, it is. That's right.
So just dive into that a little bit more. You say winning a bid is hard enough, paying for material shouldn't be. So if I'm a contractor and I'm listening to this podcast, why is that approach really going to benefit me?
These other solutions that we've talked about today are not really specific to construction.
Right.
And that's why there is friction related to financing and subs and GCs, because they're forced to use financial products that aren't designed for them. And that's really how we've created our product to support the construction payment cycle. And we've created our process to really follow that. I think what's difficult with something like a line of credit, it's going to take 30 to 60 days to get that set up and working and vetted and all of the diligence. Something like our product, you can come and get enrolled and we can pay your supplier same day.
Right.
And, we've removed a lot of the friction, but we take a look at the project because really, at the end of the day, the strength of the project and the work that the sub is doing on the project is what matters. And banks don't really understand that. And that's really where we're concentrating our efforts. So if you're a commercial contractor, let's say you're in a hospital, there are a few phases to it. You're going to be purchasing materials over 6 or 12 months. This is an entirely project-based financing. So the contractor would have the ability to take out financing with us at each step of the way. Each purchase would have its own 120-day terms. All they do is pay a little bit interest on the way. They don't have to worry about paying it off until it's been paid. It's effectively a pay when paid solution for the contractor, which is really what they try to negotiate with their suppliers.
Yeah, you go. So that's interesting. That paid when paid piece is obviously critical. So how can a GC help their subs as it relates to financing?
We're trying to change the perception of financing in the market because a lot of the financing that subs are drawn to are with factoring that we talked about earlier that cause that friction in the relationship.
Right.
GCs should want their contractors to have financing available, because that means they're going to have that strength. They're going to have the ability to actually complete the project. So if I was a GC, I would be looking to partner with potentially a local bank, or, there's some online, lenders or material financing lenders like Build that can be their go-to solution. And if they have the relationship with the finance company, it's going to take that friction out of the equation. So this GC, they won't be in a position where a factoring company is approaching them saying, hey, we're going to get paid now. The GC doesn't really know who the factoring company is.
Right.
Let's take a step back. Construction it's entirely relationship based.
Yep.
So the financing portion should be as well.
When a company contacts you, what are you looking at that are red flags where you're saying, no, we're not going to work with these guys? And what are the green flags that say, yeah, these guys look like the folks that we want to work with?
There are some basic parameters on the company side, years in business. We look at the FICO of the business owner, but really it's the project.
Right.
We don't actually provide hey, you're approved or not approved until we look at the project.
Okay.
So you could have a contractor that's been in business for 6 months, but if he's on, a high rise going up in downtown Austin, which is where I'm located, right, that's a really strong project. We're going to be willing to provide the materials and the financing to that contractor, really probably whatever they need. Specifically on a government project, I mean, that's like gold to us, right? We know that they're going to get paid. It's just a matter of time.
Yes. Okay. So there's an interesting distinction. So you may be looking at a company that does have a project, but, for instance, let's say we're in the middle of the COVID crisis and it is a commercial building, and, the completion date may be, extended out or something like that. Does that give you some pause? How has the COVID affected you guys as far as that's concerned?
That's a great question. So back in March, when, COVID was really at the starting line there, we didn't really know what to expect. So we did pull back a little bit. Yep. And we wanted just to kind of wait and see how things materialized. And what we found is there were certain pockets within the country, like New York City, for example, where construction pretty much shut down. Right. And then there were other areas where it slowed down a little bit. And then there were markets like in Texas where things weren't really that affected. So, we pulled back a little bit, but then what we realized is, this is really the time when contractors need financing the most. I mean, yep, this is why we're here, to help these contractors weather the storm. So then we put our foot back on the gas, and we've really been throttling ever since. And, we believe in really partnering with our customers. At the end of 120 days, if they haven't paid us back, we'll actually extend it. We'll get in touch with the GC. They'll communicate, yeah, there have been some delays. And again, I think this is really what sets apart someone like Build versus a traditional bank that doesn't really care about any of that. They're going to look at the numbers. They're going to see that, the numbers aren't shaking out the way that they underwrote the contractor up front, and they're going to demand payment. They don't care about the actual project.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right there, sort of in the heart of, a project in terms of getting it built, positioning yourself between the GCs, the subs, and the suppliers.
Yeah. So one thing we do for our contractor customers, so contractors have to get approved with their GCs, right? They have to go through, the finance department and make sure that the financials look good and so forth. So one thing we will provide these subs who are bidding on projects are pre-approval letters. Uh-huh. And what this does is it alerts the GC that they have the ammunition that they need as it relates to purchasing materials. So they don't have to worry about delays on the project because this sub's inability to procure the materials.
Okay. Excellent. So if I'm a sub, how can I get in touch with you guys?
Yeah. So you can find us online, build, BILLD.com. It's a play on obviously the word build, but BILLD.com. And you can go ahead and enroll online. It takes about 5 minutes to really get set up. Our full, I'll call it a credit app, but it's not really a full credit application. It literally takes 5 minutes. You can do that online, and then we'll have one of our colleagues reach out to you and have a conversation and see if we're a good fit.
Excellent. And so you're there in Austin. Tell me, if I was to visit Austin, what's a great place to go out for a meal?
Oh man, what kind of food are you looking for? If you want
Barbecue.
barbecue, I mean, Franklin's is notorious here. It's on the east side. Highly recommend Franklin's. It's a type of place where you have to stand outside it. I think it's the people start lining up at like 6 a.m. and
Wow.
they're going to brisket by about noon. So it's worth it.
That's beautiful. Well, Jesse, I really appreciate your time and your insights.
Eric, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity. And to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.